Welcome to 20th Century Fox. I'm Alan Hirschfield, chairman of the company. I think it's appropriate that we started our commitment to pay-per-view television, cable, with Star Wars, and we've gone all the way finally to the top today with The Who. It demonstrates our commitment to pay-per-view, to bring the audience all over the world, and especially the United States, the biggest, the best, and the most exciting events that man can imagine. They will be in film, in music, and in sports, in what we would believe will become the predominant entertainment medium of the 80s and the 90s. It's especially gratifying that we can bring you today my favorite group, and I guess the world's favorite group, The Who. So, for a kid that grew up in Oklahoma, this is an exciting moment. I don't know what it was like in Shepherd's Bush, but it wasn't so great in Oklahoma. It's a long way from Shepherd's Bush to Mulberry Street here on the 20th Century lot. Dave Marsh once said that rock just isn't something to grow up with. At its best, it's something that helps everyone keep growing. And with songs like From My Generation to Behind Blue Eyes, Who Are You, and from albums like Magic Bus to Tommy, Quadrophenia, and Now It's Hard, The Who have helped us all keep growing. It's still the maximum rock and roll group in the world, as far as I'm concerned, and as far as several million people are concerned. And it's what The Who are still all about. It's still for my generation, and now for my children's generation. It doesn't make me feel old, it just makes me feel better. And I get a lot of pleasure from that. A fellow named Peter Townsend once said, "Rock won't eliminate your problems, but it will sort of let you dance all over them." I'm still dancing. I hope all of you will continue to do so, and especially with this group. Now it's my pleasure to introduce you to Andrew Wald, the president of our 20th Century Fox Telecommunications, and the man who, along with Steve Roberts, was chiefly responsible for this great event, which we think will be a major world event come the 17th of December. Andrew Wald.
Thank you, Alan. I had the pleasure of seeing the group play the other night in Berkeley, and I want to tell you, I danced for a good 2.5 hours, and I think everybody who sees them and the millions of people who will be able to see them as part of this event will share that with us. The tour has been an overwhelming success. You'll get some more information about that. It's my pleasure to welcome the members of the band here, and we're announcing today that on December 17th at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, their final concert will be televised live from the Maple Leaf Gardens in Toronto. It will be shown in the United States as part of a pay-per-view network. It will be telecast live. We're in negotiations to Australia, Japan, and South America. It will be also simulcast here in the United States as part of what is the largest piece of radio programming ever put together, a 6.5-hour tribute to The Who. 4 hours, History of The Who, will precede the telecast, followed by a live Dolby stereo transmission nationwide of the final concert. It will also be seen on college campuses that night, and we're hoping that areas of the country which do not have pay-per-view capabilities, we will have some closed circuit. The enthusiasm here at Fox is contagious around the studio. You see an Earth station which the group walked by on the way over. This transmission is going live from 20th Century Fox up to the West Star satellite and to New York and Toronto, where there is a closed circuit telecast with the press, and you'll be having questions coming from there. I don't have anything more to say other than this is a real treat for me. I'd like to introduce the members of The Who. On my left, Mr. John Entwistle. Next, Mr. Peter Townsend. Next to him, Mr. Roger Daltrey. And last and by no means least, the man that makes the beat, Mr. Kenny Jones. Ladies and gentlemen, it's our pleasure to have The Who here today. We think they're the greatest rock and roll band in the world, and this marriage of rock and roll and satellites is a thing of the future. I'd like to introduce Mr. Mike Carruthers, who's going to moderate now and take questions after some statements. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome. We certainly want to welcome the members of the press here in Los Angeles for coming out tonight, this morning, I should say, and also acknowledge the members of the press watching us live via our satellite in New York and in Toronto, Canada. We will be taking questions from all three cities in just a moment, but this is, as you know, a very exciting event. Certainly the Who are legends of rock and roll. This is their farewell concert tour, and before we do take questions, I would like to ask one of the members of the group to make a statement. I believe Roger or Peter?
What kind of steak? Yeah, what kind of steak? Well, we're happy to be here as well. A nice sunny day, and a little bit early for me anyway. And under this 16 inches of makeup, I'm as white as a sheet. Well, banana-coloured, really. And straight afterwards, I'm going to go right back to bed. Is that good enough?
That's very good. That's it.
I must say, I think that satellite does have great potential in rock and roll, and it's because the audience is ever widening, and particularly internationally, and it's a big kick for us to be involved in such a major experiment such as this, using satellite for a live concert, and I've got high hopes for it.
Thank you. The concert tour, which started earlier this month, will encompass, when it's finished, 32 cities and 34 concerts. Approximately 1.5 million tickets have been sold during the tour. They've played to capacity audiences everywhere. We'd now like to open things up for questions, and here's how this will work. First, we'll start here in Los Angeles, then we'll take a question from one of the other cities. We ask you to step up to the microphone. That's the only way anyone else can hear you. And please state your name, who you're with, who you would like to address the question to. And we'll start here in Los Angeles with a question, please. Someone has a question. Please step up to the microphone.
Why is a Warner Recording Act...
Would you state your name, please?
Bob Murray. I'm a reporter with an advertising agent. Why is a Warner Recording Act hooked up with 20th Century Fox? The parent company of your record label is even more heavily involved in new video than Fox.
We don't know.
I don't really know.
Nor do I.
We have another question, please? Yes.
I'd just like to sort of throw this out. Randy Campbell, Superior Communications International Radio. I'd just like to throw this out and ask you fellas, if 20 years ago or so in the pubs of London, when you were playing for small groups and sometimes a little larger, did you ever have any idea it would come to this on an international level?
Simply no.
Let's go to New York now. We have a question. New York, are you there?
I am.
Hello, New York.
Question.
Yes, go ahead, please.
This question is directed to Pete Townshend.
All right.
Mr. Townshend, I've had the opportunity to see the band over the past 12 years about 7 times, and I don't believe I've ever heard you perform any songs from any solo albums.
No.
Say it so pure and easy.
No, I don't. We up to now, and as this is our last tour, I don't suppose there are going to be any changes. We've avoided dipping into the fair treasure trove of material which we've produced as solo artists. John Entwistle started his solo career the first, I believe, and has produced like what, about five albums. I've made 3. Roger's made 4 or 5, and really, when we're together as the Who, we stick to that particular area. I think maybe as writers, John and I feel that the stuff that we do as solo artists would accommodate the Who, but the Who we have difficulty performing live, performing enough of the material which represents the Who's history. And the Who haven't really made that many records over 15 years. We've only done 10 studio albums, and that's not a tremendous output. We still have difficulty playing the songs which people want to hear live anyway. And I think if we started to play selections from solo albums as well, I think the main thing it would do, apart from give us a problem with fitting the stuff in, I mean, I can barely last 2.25 hours as it is without dropping dead, would be to confuse the band's image in the public eye. We are a group first and foremost, and in fact I think none of us would be in any doubt that our solo careers are very much hinged on the success of the band, and what we do in the future as solo artists will definitely jump off from the success of the band up to this present day.
Thank you, Peter. Let's take your question, please. Your name?
Hi, my name is Rona Elliott. I'm with the Source Radio Network. Good morning, you guys.
Hi.
Looks a little early for you.
You too.
Yeah, it is a little early. I was looking there. You look more alive now. One of the things that's sort of happening throughout the whole rock and roll world now, and it's understood on the rumor mill that your interest at all is in the video thing that's happening. Could you talk a little bit about what your thoughts are about things like MTV and rock and roll and the success of rock and roll music now?
I think MTV is really good. I think it's going to create more problems for the record industry, but it's a good format, and I think some of the videos that's coming from England especially are incredible, and it's a great way of promoting groups that aren't particularly good on stage, because there's quite a few groups like that.
Do you think it'll change the relationship with radio and the success of... People say that MTV and that kind of thing will make it able to break records on TV instead of on radio. You think so?
I think so, yeah.
It's happened in England. Definitely.
Definitely, yeah.
I think...
People buy the record just to see the video,
Yeah.
to get the video on the screen.
I think a well-made promotional video can break a record, particularly if the band is a band with a particular look or a particular image that they want to sell, and the music is sublimated to some extent to that. I do believe, though, that MTV is, and from my contact, and the Who have had a lot of contact with MTV, and they're good people. One of the things that we like about them is they're very open-minded, and it's a very experimental format at the moment, and they're still getting a tremendous amount of response from people. At the moment, everybody's going, yeah, 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 I just watch it all day and can't switch it off. But I think once that has died down, the initial, the appetite for the stuff which they have to air at the moment, I think that perhaps the medium will deepen, and then you're going to have to find out to what extent musicians are willing to sublimate the music for the visual image. I mean, how much they're willing to become film directors and move away from what is really still an incredibly potential a communication form of great potential, which is music. You know.
So are you saying that you think the music might change because of the video emphasis?
Sure, I think it
really has.
I think it has already, particularly in Britain with groups. I mean, I would say that an artist, a British artist, say somebody like Steve Strange, is as good as his last video, and he'll use a terrific video director in order to sell a record which is basically just a remake of an old soul song or something like that. It's the video is most important with an artist like that. It's not true for the Who. We run deeper than that. But you know, I think the thing that everybody's looking to in video is a little depth. And until that depth is plumbed, I don't think it'll ever really satisfy people that have grown up with music, because that music has given them more than just a few pretty pictures.
Is there anything now that's scratching the surface when you talk about plumbing those depths that's reaching toward that?
I wonder whether it can actually be done on the box. whether it's an intense enough medium. And I still look first towards features, I think.
Okay, we have to move on. Let's
Thank you very
let's go to New York for a question. New York, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead, please.
My name is Jeffrey Peisch, and I'm from MTV Music Television. I have a question for Roger. Roger, we interviewed you in our studios about 2 weeks ago, and I think our video jock, J.J. Jackson, asked you about doing a live pay-per-view show, and you told him at that time there were no plans to do one. I want to know what's happened to make the group change its mind.
Well, someone signed a contract. Really, I mean, at that time, nothing was finalised. That's it, really.
Okay, we have a question here from Los Angeles.
Yeah, my name's Gary. I'm a free agent. And through some of the most recent material and some of the recent interviews, I've noticed that, well, Pete, at least, has an interest in, like, the nuclear situation of the world these days, and I wonder if you feel a responsibility as a member of a band like The Who to spread your feelings about that and try and turn other people on to the way.
Yeah, I think when we first went in to make It's Hard, I think one of the things that I first said to everybody was that I felt that, you know, I didn't want to sit down and write songs about just anything, and I wanted to reflect something which everybody in the band felt fairly strongly about. And one thing that came across as a common denominator is that we are all parents now with growing kids, and there's a concern about the planet, and I suppose also a feeling that a lot of people of our age have sat back for a long time, and that we wanted to do our bit through our music and through our writing. It's the best way to express yourself if you're a writer, or if you depend on writing as that medium, which rock and roll does, and to say something about it. So a lot of the songs on the Who's new album do touch on those questions, and I don't have any answers, I'm afraid. Yes or no to proposition, whatever it is. I mean, I don't know. I mean, who knows? I think the fact that everybody is debating about it is the important thing, and I think we should keep debating and keep thinking and keep facing up to it until something is done. That's all I can do as an uneducated, uninformed, but concerned and caring individual. And
Well, that was going to be my next question.
We have to move on, though.
I wasn't sure if you knew Tuesday was Election Day, and you could probably spread a lot of word.
Thank you very much. Next,
yeah,
next
Pete
question,
Who,
please.
that's the one.
Yes.
Yes, my name is Bruce Barrett from the Rio Hondo El Paisano newspaper, and my question is directed to Pete. I was wondering if it's true that you're going to be touring as a solo artist, perhaps next year?
No,
No.
I have no plans.
Okay, I realize this is the last concert tour for the tours, but I was wondering if the group as a whole is going to maybe do individual concerts in the future, perhaps even in LA, hopefully again.
I think it's open for everybody at the moment. We're still, nobody's made any hard and fast decisions, and everything's still pretty open.
Okay, one more question. I was wondering if Roger was going to pursue his acting career like in Mick Vicker, Tommy.
Yeah, if I get offers. I mean, I'm doing.
Be in a film?
I'm doing the Beggars Opera for BBC Television when I go back. I'm doing a thing called the Beggars Opera for Jonathan Miller. That's in February next year. But the group is still the main thing, and I mean, like Pete says, I think we will probably do shows, and there'll be events, but no more tours.
All right, thank you. Yes, please.
Sandy Kenyon from CNN. I just want to ask you, given what you said and what Pete said, that the group is first and foremost, why give up touring?
You can, unless you've done it, you'll never know what touring is, and it's a nightmare. And it, in a funny way, it kind of limits what the band does. Touring puts its own limitations on the band, and I think we've gone as far as we can go. I mean, we can't get any bigger than we are in that field. And it's good to go out on top. I think we can become much more adventurous without touring. In a funny way, I think the band will actually become bigger by stopping touring.
Oh, God.
You mean because of the mystique? Why would it be bigger?
No, not the mystique. I just think we can do better things. I think if you're doing a one-off event, you can put a hell of a lot more into it than when you're dragging your body around the country for 6 weeks. trying to survive, really.
The thing is that a rock concert, and what makes a great rock concert is audience contact. And when you get to the stage when you're playing in massive arenas and dealing with audiences of over 50 or 60,000 people every second or third day of your life, I think the idea, one of the only ways I can get through it is by remaining detached from that idea. If I psyched myself up, if I walked out on the stage every night and said, there are 65,000 people out there, I'd probably be wearing brown trousers by the time I got on the stage. I mean, you've got to be completely detached. And I think if you detach yourself from an audience, what's the point of being on a stage? It's a very different experience from working in a nightclub or in a small hall.
John, final question. Do you feel the same way?
No.
Why not?
Because he already wears brown trousers.
Do you want to give up touring?
No, not particularly, but it has to be a group decision. Yeah.
Are you opposed to it then?
Yeah, I am. But
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question, please.
Yes, my name's Jeff Bliss from the Pepperdine Graphic, and I was wondering, can you see yourselves pushing or producing more bands, say, for example, like who you're going to be playing with today, like The Clash, things like that, getting behind them and maybe putting in your own 2 cents worth into their music?
No.
Let's go to Toronto now for a question. Toronto, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead, please.
Peter Goddard, Toronto Star. Why Toronto for your last concert in North America? It's actually a two-part question. What are your plans for Europe? Peter?
Toronto, basically, because it's one of our favourite places to play. And I think there are some technical reasons as well, which I'm not really all that familiar with. But I'm happy that it's Toronto. And I think if it came down to me making a selection of places to play, it would probably fall to about 3 or 4 cities. And Toronto would definitely be one of them. I think, I can't really say why, but I've always had a very special feeling for the audience there. Perhaps because it's got a slightly European feel to it. It's a good balance for us between the North American and European market in mood. I always feel very comfortable there. And what was the other part of the question?
The European segment of the tour, are you definitely planned yet?
No, we haven't. And I'm, as an individual, and as you probably heard, I mean, we're still trying to find our feet as individuals in terms of what we're going to do in the future. And we are a group and a co-op in the fact that we do share decision making. As an individual, I'm concerned that we should put our energy into the right place in Europe, just as we have over here. I think America is a place where it's right to do the kind of touring that we've done. It does reflect well on the band, and the rock and roll audiences are capable of dealing with it, particularly the large arena situation. In Europe, there are less places that you can perform, I think, and we probably won't have a substantial touring situation in Europe. We'll probably play a number of key places, so there won't be a tour of this scale in Europe or anywhere else. So this really is our last major bash.
Okay, thank you. Let's catch up a little bit here and take another question from Toronto. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. John Major from Chum Radio, and I just want to say, first of all, I'm really happy that you are choosing Toronto to come and play the final concert tour, the final concert date. You have 2 dates that are happening here in Toronto. Will the first date be a warm-up for the televised event, or are you planning 2 dates merely just to cover the number of people that are going to want to come to Toronto to see you play?
No, the first one is a warm-up, because we hope to play some new songs that we haven't played on the tour, so it won't be just like watching the show that we've toured around with. And the first one is warm-up for the final bash.
We're experimenting on you.
Thank you. Okay, we have a question from Los Angeles now.
Okay, Gary Carr, USC Daily Trojan. A great deal of your audience at the Coliseum today will have been either not born or very young when you first started out. And Pete, I was wondering if you're intensely aware of this, and if so, what have you done to be able to relate to this audience that's 15, 16, 17 years old?
Well, we've tried. We've tried to just simply to keep the integrity of what we do. One of the things that's difficult in any new art form, and I think rock and roll has become an art form and is as it were growing into its 40s now. Although what I regard as definitive rock and roll records were made in the early 50s, but the kind of conscientious, self-motivated writing that accompanies what I regard as being good rock and roll has to be written from the heart. And I don't think that there's any way that a band like The Who, we're in our late 30s now, can actually condescend to get into any kind of Dear Abby situation as far as writing for young kids. We have been through a lot. A lot of it's been incredibly exciting and incredibly fulfilling, and I think we're wiser after the events, but a lot of it's been tragic as well, and a lot of it's been very hard. And I don't think that because an audience is young, that we should necessarily modify the way that we work. We still approach our work and our writing and everything that we do in exactly the same way. And I think our music is growing up, and I think young people are responding possibly to the directness of that. That's about it.
I understand there are over 90,000 people expected at the Coliseum this evening.
Oh, God, brown trousers again.
Yeah, there you go. Let's take a call from New York. Hello?
Hello?
Yes.
This is Tony Seidemann from Variety. For one, you've mentioned that a couple of times, you've mentioned just like playing in large stadiums about how hard it is to reach the audience. If you don't like it, why do you do it?
It's an evolutionary process. Places get larger and larger and larger as you play. My favourite audience size is around 15,000 people. There aren't many stadiums of that size. I mean, one goes from... In fact, if you think of regular theatres, it's very hard to find a regular theatre that seats more than about 3,000 people, whether it's a cinema place or a place where musicals are shown. Rock and roll audiences are such that, and rock and roll performances are such that we really deserve venues that are geared up for specifically for music. Nobody seems to have felt that it's been worthwhile so far, and that's a shame. So we end up playing in sports arenas which are really designed for other things. The reason that we play large arenas is that there's always been a limit to the amount of work that we can do on a tour, and if we play a small hall, a lot of people get upset because they can't see the band. And as my wife once said to me as I came back for the weekend after being away for 6 months, this is better than nothing.
Let's take another call from New York, please. Hello.
The cover of your latest album has video game players. You've mentioned in this conference the health of the record industry, which is declining. Is it hard to reach a generation that has the experience of video games instead of, say, Vietnam? And do you think that by having something like a video game on the cover, you're contributing to the unhealth of the record industry?
Hey! Video games are more important than Vietnam. Everybody knows that. No, I think we didn't actually conceptualize the album cover. It was a graphic designer, and I warmed to the idea because I think in a way it was a kind of a loose quip. I mean, you might know that Warner Communications, who own the record label that we're on, make more money out of video games now than they do out of records. And
also own MTV.
They also own MTV. And I think that we were just making a sideswipe comment about it. I mean, there's nothing portentous about it, I don't think. I think video games are an amusement which are very, very different. They play a very different role to the way the role music played when most of the musically informed American kids were growing up. I think it's a different time and a different mood. I definitely believe that music seems to have less penetrating power now. But I think that's due to its content. I think the content has changed. I think the passion of the individual has changed. I think I'm talking about the artists. And radio has changed a lot. It's become much more streamlined, much more formatted, much more bowed to advertising revenue. And I think at the moment everybody in the industry anyway feels that a change is due. Quite when, nobody really knows, but a change is due.
Thank you. Take a question from Los Angeles.
My name's Barbie, and I'm from KSBC Claremont, which is a college radio station.
And she wants to ask Kenny a question.
I wanted, I just loved the small faces when you did that. I was like that tall. But I'm still not that tall. But I wanted to ask, because you're saying that you felt more comfortable in Toronto because of the European element, and what you're just saying about the golf and music. And do you see anyone that's like a post-'77 band that can bridge the golf? Like, do you sense a growing golf between America and Europe? Like that Americans are growing more isolated? And
no, I think not. I don't think they're becoming more isolated. If you're young and American and you've been to Europe, you might have found that the Europeans, particularly the British perhaps, and the Germans, are fairly antagonistic towards young Americans. But I've analysed this right the way down, and I think it's just simply due to jealousy. That America is a larger country, much more self-contained, and it can stand knocks a little better. And in Britain and in Europe,
also wealthy.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. Yeah. There's I think music.
A lot of envy, I think.
Musically. The great thing that European musicians feel about the States is I suppose that it is an open area. There's great open-mindedness. I don't know about I suppose what really bothers me is seeing where the new talent comes from in America, how it's weaned, and I know each different area has its own.
do you like any of the new bands, like any of the Los Angeles bands?
I like quite a few of them, yeah. I mean, I like... I was here for a while in January, and I got a certain amount of exposure to local bands. I like the Blasters when they came out, but they're kind of old hat, really, aren't they? They're kind of a rockabilly band. But I do like their album. I like T-Bone Burnett. He's from California. I mean, neither of them are young musicians. I'm not really all that au fait, but I mean, it did feel at that time, particularly with K-Rock starting to play new music all the time, that a geographical sense, a local sense was improving. And that always helps. If LA musicians think of themselves as only having to conquer LA and not the whole world, then at least they can deal with that first. I think a lot of young bands in America are intimidated from the off because they feel they've got to make it in America. Whereas in Britain, you feel that you just have to make it in Britain. It's a very, very small country. So that always helps. It helps you to get your first break, anyway.
Thank you, Peter. Let's go to Toronto now for a question.
It's Liam Lacey from the Toronto Globe and Mail. I'd like to ask Pete Townsend his comment on the Jam's decision to break up this week. Earlier this year, I believe you wrote that the Jam could be the Who of the 80s.
I didn't know they were going to break up, and I'm very sad. I don't really know what to say. I've always felt if the Clash and the Jam and the Sex Pistols had been one band, there you would have had it. I think working as individuals, they each have an incredible amount to strive for. But I've always preferred the Clash, the music of the Clash and the sentiments of the Clash to the Jam. But I've always felt that the Jam were a very British band. And I've always liked that about them, and I've always had stand-up rows with Paul Weller about America and how important I felt the American audience was. I'm very sorry to hear they split up.
Let's take another question from Toronto, please.
Yes, it's James Mark from Now Magazine in Toronto. I'd like to address Mr. Townsend on the subject of whether or not, owing to the fact that there's a distinct historical precedent being set here, both in a media event and a rock event. I'm wondering whether or not being a rock phenomena has compromised your honesty to such an extent that you feel that you've more or less reached the zenith in terms of this scale of an event.
I think it is a question of honesty to some extent. One thing that you can't do in rock and roll is pretend. You can't act, and because I think the audience is so intensely analytical, and I think that it's important that you should be true to the principles that you have in your heart. And I think The Who have always wanted to be a big band, always wanted to play to as large an audience as possible, to reach as many people as possible. I was talking to Strummer of The Clash the other day, and I was saying, how do you feel about playing in front of audiences of 100,000 people? And he said, great, you know, it's 6 weeks at the Brixton Fair deal. And that's a small club in Britain. And I think we feel pretty much the same way. I don't feel that any of my ideals have been compromised, and I'm sure nobody else in the band feels that way by anything that we're doing at this time. In terms, I think increasing the size of a potential audience for a live performance just makes us feel better, particularly if the contact is fairly pure. And I think that cable it's just cable. It's got to be pure. It's got to be direct. It's at least the video image which happens at the same time as the sound, and that doesn't happen in arenas. You know, I swing my arm and 2 seconds later the sound arrives. So I don't know. There's a lot to be said for experimenting at this level and seeing what kind of feedback we get. I suppose if we got an intense feedback from it, we'd look to it more deeply ourselves. It's feedback we want. It's an audience we want, and wherever there's an audience, there will be. And I think if we can find a real, touchable, reachable audience through pay TV and through cable performances, then we're sure as hell going to follow them and touch them in every way that we can.
Thank you. Let's take a question here in Los Angeles.
Steve Whitmore from the Glendon News Press. Mr. Townsend, how much influence did you have on getting T-Bone Burnett to play as an opening act for your band?
None whatsoever.
None at all?
I didn't even ask for him.
Okay, thank you.
I'm pleased that he's on, though.
Okay. One other quick question.
Quickly.
On this tour, have you had any influence on the people you would like to play as opening acts for your band?
No.
Or they've just been picked for you?
No, I think obviously the people that are our agents that help scale the tour, put the tour together, and our management are very aware of the kind of music that we like and the kind of people that we would like to have. And I think they've approached people that they felt fitted in gracefully to the kind of shows that we put on.
I think the Clash were the only ones we really went for.
I hadn't had much to do with the Clash being on. I'm delighted that they are. They're my favourite band at the moment, so I'm knocked out. But I think it's more a kind of bit of entrepreneurish, skillful showmanship. I think it's a great combination.
Thank you. Let's go to New York for a question. New York.
Hi, this is Ellen Say from Glencoff and Wishner in New York. I'd like to address a question to one of the gentlemen from Fox. I believe earlier you mentioned that you plan to distribute the programming to college campuses. I'm curious as to how this programming will be distributed, what company you may have made arrangements with, and the numbers of students that may be involved in this.
The answer to that is it will be going out over Campus Entertainment Network, and I think more information will be available and now that the date has been set.
Okay, let's take another New York call, please. Are you there?
Yes, my name is Gene T. Bloom from Public Television, the Nightly Business Report. I understand that there is somewhat of a financial arrangement between yourselves and the Schlitz Brewing Company concerned with the financing of this tour. I wish you could please detail what this arrangement is and why you feel it was necessary.
I don't know the exact details, and I'm really glad that I can say that honestly. But In fact, I got into a debate with a very respected rock writer called Dave Marsh on this subject about whether or not being sponsored by anybody, whether it's a beer company or whomever, on a rock tour is an exhibition of a growing greed in the rock business. In actual fact, the ability to mount a sophisticated rock and roll performance in stadiums and keep ticket prices within the reach of the kid on the street is a pretty hefty exercise. It's expensive, and it does have to be underwritten by other means than just the ticket price. This is one of the hard facts of life. I think even small bands just starting off have difficulty paying their rent, and all you have to do is scale that up a couple of million times and you're in the same position as The Who. We have to come out of a tour making money, otherwise we can't live, and neither can any of the 200 or 300 people that are involved in our lives live either. In actual fact, the Schlitz deal for us represents a number of different things which we feel are advantageous. In particular, there's the fact that it allows us to have enough capital free to buy luxuries such as a charter plane for the trip, which means that we arrive at gigs fresher, we can travel when we feel like travelling. There are certain sort of more personal things which they've helped us with, making life easier on a day-to-day basis. In terms of the audience, it seems to me that the interference in the audience's enjoyment of a stadium gig is nil. Their name appears on a ticket, and certain posters and promotional things which go along with the show. And as you probably know, they use our name in commercials. For us, it allows us extra capital, extra advertising, and every time their name appears in part of this campaign, our name appears, it helps us. And we're delighted to get this influx of what I regard as getting in on the advertising revenue before the newspapers.
Thank you.
And the radio.
Question from Los
We get more
Angeles.
control of our own career, you see.
Go ahead.
I'm Dixie Watley with Entertainment Tonight. You have your own production company. Why did you feel it necessary to hook up with 20th Century Fox?
Have we got our own production company?
No, we don't have our own production company.
Haven't you been involved in production yourself, though?
We have a production company which made one film, The Kids Are All Right, and we did it once.
That was enough?
I think you only make that mistake once, yeah. Somebody told me that the guy, what's the name of the guy that's the Muppet movie man?
Jim Henson.
Yeah, has just paid for his film, and he's probably sitting with hand in mouth. I mean, it's a fantastic amount of money, and God bless him for doing it. I wish him luck, but it is a risky business, and I don't think we recouped. It's very difficult. We could never undertake anything on this scale. Never.
How much control are you maintaining on this?
Total creative control.
Total creative control.
Which is important.
But no control over this press conference.
No.
Let's take a question from New York now. Hello, New York.
Yes, this is Jean Grillo from Cablevision Magazine. This is a question for Peter Townsend. Given your desire to see more depth on TV and other cable television shows, how do you make those video appearances more touchable and reachable?
Well, I think it's a really interesting question, and there's not really enough time to go into it in any depth. But I mean, I just feel it's a new potential art form. I just don't think that at the moment. It's one of these things that tends to happen a lot in this day and age. The technological advances are outstripping the artist's ability to keep up. We're just getting to grips with the phonograph record when video comes along, and I think it's just another challenge to the creative mind and to the artist and to the performer. I think it's an exciting medium, but I think it's it's something you could debate about for hours as to how it might best be used.
Thank you, New York. Question from here in Los Angeles.
Yes, my name is Henry Guevara from LA Collegiate City College, and this is for Pete. I read where you were getting into jazz music, And if so, where do you see your own music going? And also, a second part of the question is, how much longer can The Who exist as a studio-only band?
Well, we don't know whether we are going to be a studio-only band. I don't really know yet. And as you know, John feels very strongly that live appearances on a regular basis are vital to keeping the standard of our performances up. That's how John feels. In terms of our recording work, I suppose our public performances and appearing live are important as well. They certainly do inject a kind of an energy and a lifeblood into the way that you work, which you can get no other way. What I want to do as an individual, I don't think it really matters here. You know.
Is there any conscious decision to get the Clash as an opening act on?
I thought we already answered that. No, there was no collective decision. No.
Thank you. Let's go to New York. You there, New York?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Bill Burton, Leisure Time, Electronics. Question for Peter Townsend. You don't seem very enthusiastic about video, and at the same time, you don't seem very enthusiastic about the power of music to reach people through records and through radio. Are you really upset about this? How are you going to reach people with your message?
Firstly, I don't have messages as such. I have opinions and feelings, and if I had messages, maybe I'd be a politician or something. I don't know. And also, I have music to play. That's why I'm in a band, and that's why the Who exist. I don't feel bad about video at all. I just feel it's a new medium which has potential. I think that's pretty optimistic, isn't it? I mean, I'm giving it a chance. If I'd seen something outstanding, if I'd seen something staggering, if I'd seen something that went on from, you know, the Ricky Lee Jones film, a video which I saw almost 4 years ago now, or if I saw something that was a move on from the last Steve Strange video I saw, then I would perhaps feel differently. But there are only one or two isolated exceptions where you can look at the video and you can say that is art, that communicates something, that touches me, that I could live with for the rest of my life. Whereas I hear a record every week, if not more often, sometimes every day, which I put in my rack and I say I will live with that music for the rest of my life. That's the kind of commitment that I make to it. And so I think in that sense it is a very new medium. And in terms of me feeling that music, feeling bad about the music business, I feel bad about the music business. I certainly don't feel that music has lost its ability to communicate, far from it. I think music is best at communicating mood and feeling and frustration and love and other slightly more abstract emotions rather than delivering messages. I think when rock music tries to become didactic, I think that's probably where it starts to fall down. But no, I still feel very strongly that music is a very powerful form. And when I was talking about possible changes in radio, those are changes which I feel are well overdue and which I am absolutely convinced will happen. I just think that radio will loosen up in America. I just don't know when.
Let's take another question from New York, please.
Walt Grealis, RPM Magazine in Toronto. I'm curious about your comments about audiences in Toronto and how you preferred them. Can you tell us just how do you feel your audience? What gives you that feeling of more concentration or whatever in the Toronto audience as opposed to a Los Angeles audience?
I don't think Pete actually mentioned the audience. He mentioned the feel of the place, and Toronto does feel to us more European. Audiences are generally that they feel the same wherever you are throughout the world. It is really strange. Even in places like Germany and Sweden, where there's a terrific language barrier because none of us speak the language, they give out the same kind of energy. So it's not really the audience, it's the actual physical place.
Okay, take a question here in Los Angeles.
Yes, my name is Luke. I'm a musician, and this is to Pete. keyboards seem to be leading the way as far as the new music, and you're rather adept at keyboards yourself. Do you foresee your music taking on any of the qualities of, say, Peter Gabriel or Human League or anything like that?
Well, I really like both those individuals' creative work, but I really don't know. And although I agree with you that keyboards are becoming the dominant programming method for music these days, people don't make albums anymore, they program them. I think it's amazing how many people that do work with computers and with synthesizers through keyboards all have this particular... I mean, one guy in particular that said this to me was Midge Ure, who works with Visage and Ultravox, who's a real synthesizer walla. He said the guitar will never die because it has become the violin of rock and roll. It's become the orchestral expressive instrument. And I think to that extent it made me think, and I thought, well, if that's coming from a real, you know, technocrat, then he's probably right. I still feel the guitar is it's a new instrument, really. It's got a long way to go, and everybody on your block can play it, so, you know.
Can you do music, though, like a Human League, that sort of keyboard-orientated music yourself, and get
Well, I
off on
think
it?
one of the limitations of that kind of music, and I even noticed this on Peter Gabriel's new album, which I'm sure you'll agree is an absolute masterpiece as far as sound goes. I mean, it's stunning. Is the rhythmic formatting of it. It seems to me that computers have to go a little bit further in order to humanize the feel of music. At the moment, we all feel it's a great novelty that you press a button and out comes this click, which is precise to the nth degree, but that is robotic. And I think a lot of the soul of natural live music performance is lost. And so I'm waiting for the day when they can allow computers to be programmed with some kind of human feel to them. I know that they can, but it's a complex process. Human League, I like the sound that they make, but I don't like the way that it sounds like it's been churned out by an atomic clock, you know, but it's a great sound.
Let's take a question from New York, please.
Hello, my name is Eric Shea from Channels. You've been talking about communicating with people, but aren't you losing people? With all this new technology, the merging of music and satellites, aren't lower-class kids going to be left behind because they can't afford the pay-per-view fees?
Well, that, I must admit, is something that just hadn't occurred to me. I suppose you're right. You know, in Britain, when we first started to tour in this country, we thought it was a big deal that I think it was at that time 50% of the homes had TV at all. So, you know, we were brought up in Britain where even a family that had a car was considered to be upper class, where a family that owned their own home were kind of mysterious individuals. And I felt very lucky to have a father who was a musician that occasionally brought back a bonus in his pay packet. So it's very difficult to deal with that. I mean, there are great gulfs. There's no question between the people that we can reach and the people that we would like to reach. There always have been. There's whole parts of the planet. There's people that we haven't played to. We haven't toured in Australia since 1967. We just haven't got the time to do it. We can only do so much. I feel very sorry for the people that haven't got pay-per-view. How do they get one? You know, I feel very sorry for me. I haven't got pay-per-view. I haven't got cable. I've got one radio station in Britain. It's called Radio 1. It's owned by the BBC. They play what they like. And as a rule, they don't play our records, which is why we're over here. So it's not just people without money. It's also, you know, as part of the technological advance. Hopefully, once pay-per-view starts to come to grips with a flowing of finances over the next 10 years, the price will get reduced, just as television is now something which is available to everybody. It was once a luxury. Now there are TVs in the ghetto.
Thank you, Peter.
I think.
Question here in Los Angeles.
Yes, Daryl Morden, American Top 40. I was going to ask you about the stagnation of radio, but you've kind of covered that. So you mentioned a record you can take and put away, but you know you're going to listen to that for the rest of your life. Is there any recent record that comes to mind other than your own?
It's hundreds. I mean, really hundreds. I mean, I don't necessarily mean classic records, but then records that you like are personal, aren't they? I mean,
For example, you'd mentioned in interviews that you had seen Springsteen in England last year, the year before, and you found this show's inspiring. Have you listened to Nebraska at all?
yeah, and the day I got a white label of it, we were about to leave, so I haven't really given it that much time. But at first off, I didn't like it. But I know a lot of my friends who are Springsteen fans, they didn't like it at first either, and they've kind of got into it. I must admit, it was exciting for me to see such a simply produced record released by such an artist of such stature, because I think a lot of music today is overproduced. I think production can come between the audience and the artists, and it can over-sophisticate things. So it's a big swing of the pendulum from a guy who goes in and takes a year making an album to knocking it out on a cassette machine on the beach. But I think it took a lot of guts to do it. I'm glad he did it.
Thank you. Let's go to New York for a question, please.
This is Bruce Chadwick from the New York Daily News. This is for Mr. Wald. About how much would it cost somebody who has a pay-per-view system to see this concert? How many people do have those systems, the decoder boxes I think you're talking about? And what could be the total gross from this concert?
Well, we won't speculate on the total gross, but and Peter probably didn't know this, but the good news about people being able to see the concert is the price to the consumer on pay-per-view will be less than the cost of one ticket on anywhere on the concert tour this year. And what Peter, I think you have to, in looking at inflation, the price of tickets, they have kept them down in relation to everything else, and that the pay-per-view could be one of the great entertainment bargains available today. There are somewhere in excess of 2 million homes in America that are equipped for that pay-per-view, either STV, over-the-air systems like On TV and Select TV, addressable cable systems, and systems that would add filters, notch filters. I can't speculate as to gross, but I think that the momentum that the group is bringing to this final event, again December 17th in Toronto, will make it one of the most successful events in the history, the brief history albeit, of pay-per-view.
Take a question now from Los Angeles.
Okay. My name is Bill Zeiger. I'm with the East Los Angeles College Campus News. I was just wondering if the band plans on releasing a live album after this tour.
Possibly.
Possibly.
You said something.
Another question from Los Angeles, please.
My name is Scott Corey. I'm from the Occidental College newspaper. You've released many conceptual albums in the past, Tommy, Quadrophenia, and they've transferred to film very well. Would you try and do the same thing in the future with a video project?
I suppose, yeah, maybe. I think I've been thinking about the next Who album, and I've been thinking about whether or not to try to take on. In fact, I was going to talk to John about it before we go home. The possibility of starting to tackle a conceptual piece of some sort. It's a bit of a nightmare to think about, but on the other hand, it does give a creative project like an album added life. If it converts to video, if it converts to film, if it can be expressed at other levels, if it's a dramatic work of enough cohesiveness to appear on the stage, which unfortunately Tommy hasn't proved to be, then all the better. You know, it gives the creative work a longer life. It means that as writers and as performers, we're in on the inception, but then the thing has a life of its own. So we might follow that. Whether or not we would pursue features rather than video, I don't know. Again, it really depends on, I suppose, what happens. Could MTV, for example, in its current form, afford to do a multiple viewing of a 2-hour conceptual piece premiered? I don't know. It's an exciting prospect, and it's the kind of thing that I expect we'll be talking to people about. You know, the market's still kind of small, so I think probably we would start with a feature. At least it's a known market.
One quick question for John Entwistle. Why don't you ever play Boris the Spider in concert?
Yeah.
You've been asking him that.
We played it about 5,000 times and got a little bit bored with it. But
Yeah, I never got bored with it. I've only just learned how to play it, John.
no, we're playing it probably on the next leg of the tour.
There used to be two guys that came to Who concerts in Britain who used to sit in the back, and one used to shout, "Magic Bus," and the other one used to shout, "Boris the Spider, Magic Bus, Boris the Spider, Magic Bus, Boris the Spider," all the way through the show. And it became a thing that caught on, and I think you still hear whole sections of the audience screaming out for Magic Bus and Boris the Spider, the two most requested songs. So
But we never play.
we never play.
We're out of time. I want to thank the members of the Who for coming down and speaking with us this morning. We also would like to thank you, the members of the press here in Los Angeles, for coming down, as well as the members of the press watching us via satellite in Toronto and in New York. And we want to say hello to all the cable operators who are carrying this live. Once again, the date is December 17th. 20th Century Fox Pay Television will be providing the Who's concert from Maple Leaf Gardens on a pay-per-view screening. Thank you again for coming.